is unhappy, somebody wants to blame someone or complain about someone, blame me. There is no one else who is responsible for this decision. I've been in public service for many years on every level of public service. I've managed dozens of emergencies. The philosophy that always worked for me is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That's what we're doing here. When we look back at this situation 10 years from now, I want to be able to say, I can say to the people of the state of New York, I did everything we could do. I did everything we could do. And this is about saving lives. And if everything we do saves just one life, I'll be happy. Last point, I'd also like people to think about, and I don't have an answer for this, and it's not what I do, but the isolation that people are feeling and the mental health consequences of what we're doing. When we quarantined people, you know, we quarantined about 10,000 people. 14 days you had to stay at home. And I spoke to many of them. And what they would say is, physically, operationally, it was difficult. But most of all, they would all talk about the sense of isolation and the feeling of isolation and not having human contact and how difficult that was. I, as you know, had my daughter who was in isolation. And I was very aware of what she was dealing with and what she was feeling. And I'll tell you the truth, I had some of the best conversations with her that I have ever had. She was alone for 2 weeks with her own thoughts, not talking to anyone else, no noise, no activity. And we talked about things in depth that we didn't have time to talk about in the past, or we didn't have the courage or the strength to talk about in the past.
Okay, we're going to continue to listen to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo there, but the governor saying that it is the most the most drastic action that he could take in announcing a 100% workforce reduction throughout New York. Essentially, the governor saying, don't go to work unless you are an essential employee. We saw this coming throughout the week. The governor started with 50%, then 75%, announcing there just a few moments ago, 100% workforce reduction throughout New York State, saying that there will be fines and closures if workers and businesses do not cooperate. Meanwhile, while that was happening, we got word from the White House. Again, we're expecting this coronavirus task force presentation to happen roughly 10 minutes from now. But word from the White House that the Defense Production Act, again, this is the act that would essentially free up ventilators and other essential medical equipment. The president has toyed with the idea of invoking this. Apparently, there was a phone call there inside the White House a short time ago, and the president yelled out after the phone call, do it now. Hans Nichols is standing by for us at the White House. Hans, what more can you tell us about this Defense Production Act that now seems imminent?
Well, it allows the U.S. government to nationalize certain industries and basically take over the means of production to try to accelerate, as you mentioned, ventilators, respirators, whatever the U.S. thinks is of crucial importance. Here's what we know about the phone call. It came from a Schumer spokesperson saying that Senator Schumer and the President of the United States around 11 a.m. were on the phone together, and the president was urged by Schumer to invoke the Defense Production Act, and that he yelled to a staffer, get it done. So that seems like like we could get a little bit of news here when we have this briefing starting in about 5-10 minutes. There are some indications that we will hear directly from the President of the United States. When I talked to the Surgeon General earlier, he suggested he had to prepare for a press conference with the President of the United States. You see the lectern up there now. So I suspect we'll get an update on testing, on just how many tests are out there, get an update on the website. Remember, the President has been somewhat inconsistent, as well as some of his leading staff members, on just when this website will be up and running, and a variety of other things. Crucially, what they're going to do on the southern border. If we see Secretary of State Mike Pompeo walk in, that could be a strong indication they're going to take drastic measures on really two different fronts with the border. One is slowing it down, having restrictions similar to what they put into place with Canada. The other is going to be more controversial, and what we had been hearing a couple days ago, that they'd be making a decision within 48 hours, which is taking anyone who crosses the border illegally between points of entry and returning them immediately to Mexico, basically sealing off the border entirely on the fear of coronavirus. One other quick, more personal note, at least in terms of the personnel staff at the White House. My colleague Peter Alexander is reporting that Ivanka Trump has tested negative for COVID-19. Remember, she had been self-isolating and working from home. Craig?
All right, Hans Nichols there for us at the White House. Hans, do stand by for us if you can, so we'll come back to you on the other side of this coronavirus task force briefing. Let me turn now for a moment to Dr. Adnan Parikh, joining us via Skype. Dr. Parikh is the Chief Medical Advisor at the Bipartisan Policy Center. He also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health at the Department of Health and Human Services from 2008 to 2015. For the purposes of this conversation, it should be noted that he has dealt with a number of outbreaks like swine flu, like Ebola as well. We just heard from the governor of New York there, Doctor. Governor Cuomo announcing that 10,000 new tests have been conducted over the past 24 hours. That has yielded some 2,950 new positive cases in New York State alone. New York has become the epicenter, if you will, for this coronavirus crisis, it would seem. Doctor, what do you make of what we just heard from Governor Cuomo?
Well, I think Governor Cuomo's on top of it. There are three vital aspects right now to the response. One is to increase testing. The second is to be more aggressive on social distancing, and I think that's what the governor has called pause, just like shelter in place in the Bay Area and stay home in California. And then I think the third aspect of this is what you were just talking about: critical medical material and personal protective equipment. I think the governor is trying to forward deploy everything the state has. But Fred, if you put together everything in our strategic national stockpile, all of our military assets, everything in our supply chain, it's not enough. And that's why the president invoking the Defense Production Act right now is the most important thing we can do. And he really needs to harness all domestic industries, not just the ones that usually make these critical medical material, but the garment industry for masks and respirators, the auto industry, the energy sector, utilities for ventilators. All of these industries need to come to the table. The government needs to provide the specs for every item that is necessary, the quantity and the timeline, and then Congress needs to, in the next emergency supplemental, ensure that there are incentives for this industry. So it's all about testing, social distancing, and critical medical material, personal protective equipment right now.
Okay, Dr. Parikh, do stand by as well if you can for a moment. I want to bring in NBC News reporter Tom Winter. He is in New York City. He has been listening very closely to Governor Cuomo over the past week or so. Tom, we just heard the governor, and again, not surprising, we saw this coming, but the governor announcing a 100% workforce reduction. Do not go to work anywhere in New York State unless you are essential. He clarified that that does include mass transit. What else did you hear there, Tom?
I think the key things here is you've got a governor who's pleading for help, Craig. At this point, and as you said, you know, the governor has been kind of walking towards this all week long. It started with the bars and restaurants being closed statewide Monday night, and workforce reductions throughout the entire week. Shelter in place is really a law enforcement term. I understand why the governor of New York is is against using that, because typically when we say that in government terms, it means don't leave your house, period, under any circumstance. There's an imminent threat to your life outside of the home. That's kind of the technical definition of it. What the governor is essentially saying here is, look, get the things you need to live. You know, if you need to get medical treatment, if you need to go to the pharmacy or a grocery store, you can do that. Other than that, that's it. Stop seeing other people. Stop being around other people. That's the key message here, Craig, is New York is heading towards, in the governor's words, a bit of a health crisis here.
Governor Cuomo also saying that bombs and bullets during World War II were what ventilators are in this fight. In fact, let's listen in again. He's taking some questions now. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Well, you can, but you'd lose.
Yeah, but as of this point, so no civil fines or penalties?
We have no civil fines on individuals at this time.
Governor, do you want the president to use the Defense Production Act to ramp up production of medical supplies?
Look, I am, if I had a New York State Defense Production Act, I would use it, Jesse. I don't have it. So what I'm saying is I'll pay businesses more. I'll fund a new business if you can make these products. I'm trying to make these products. If you are in this line of work, you know, we need masks. If you're making clothing, figure out if you can make masks. I'll fund it. So I'm doing everything I can to increase the production. That's besides having people all over the globe trying to buy product, right? We talked about Empire State Development people literally running around China trying to buy product. So if I had it, I would use it.
And Dr. Zucker, you've mentioned stockpiles. There's 3 stockpiles around the state of masks, gloves, things like that. Have those been dipped into? Are you shipping those to hospitals around the state?
We have dipped into those, and we are providing those to the hospitals that are across the state, and we're also working to resupply them.
Can you give us a sense of how many you've shipped across the state?
I'd have to look to give you an exact number.
The federal government extended tax filing deadlines to sometime in the summer. Is the same? What's New York's new deadline? Is it tied?
The deadline is the federal deadline.